Hello, and welcome back to the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode number 178. I am your host, Talmaster99. That's right, I have changed my name. And this is February 4th, 2021. Tonight, it's got the full crew here, excuse me. We've got, I guess, Cleese, we've got DBQ Hams, we got Swiss Guard. Swiss, how are you doing tonight?
Doing pretty well. We got a very loaded agenda tonight.
Yes, we're going to try to get to these stories fairly quickly, hopefully, tonight. DBQ Hams, how are you?
I'm doing okay. Lots of shoveling today, but I'm doing okay.
Okay. Sounded kind of confused, like you weren't sure.
That's right. Yeah, lots of shoveling today.
Well, and of course, we have Mr. Ageskles Stamos. Ageskles, how are you tonight?
Currently displeased because CPU utilization is a bit higher than norm. So,
Oh,
but we're where they're on.
all right. Hopefully everything's okay.
Quit mining the Bitcoin during the show, Cassicles.
He's got to get his coinage in there. All right, so tonight is our deep dive episode where we go through our news stories from the past couple weeks or so. And kind of, we've done kind of a theme here tonight, or I should say I have, trying to bunch these stories together. So let's get started. So first up, we have the studio shuffle. We've got a bunch of developer studio news here. First up, we have Vicarious Visions, owned currently by one Activision Blizzard. They have been evidently taking off what they've been doing, which was, well, the last game that they were doing was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 remake or remaster. And they're going to be moved over to the Blizzard side of the business, and they're going to be working on, shoot, I forget if it was
On the Diablo 2 remake.
Diablo 2 remake. Okay.
Which they were rumored to be working on after the Tony Hawk winded down.
Yeah, and the other, so the first article I have here is from GameIndustry.biz, and then actually that kind of briefly goes over what they're doing or what they are going to be doing. But then the Bloomberg article here from Jason Schreier, excuse me, he goes into a little bit more detail. Yeah, he said that they had already been working on it, so now they're just exclusively working on Diablo 2 remake, which I didn't. Was that announced before? I don't remember.
It was rumored. I don't think there's been a formal announcement at all, but it's been rumored for probably since this summer. I remember reading some rumors about it.
Oh, okay. And then, in doing that, they have, I guess, what they were calling, or maybe he was calling Team One.
No, that's their internal team. That's the kind of just like EAD and Nintendo. They're different kind of team names. So Team One
Right.
was a Blizzard name. Yep.
Yeah. The former team there kind of was dismantled and either absorbed into Blizzard or, uh, unfortunately probably let go at that point. And they worked on, I shouldn't say been working on, they had worked on Warcraft 3 Reforged, which I guess was kind of the lowest reviewed or I should say not Activision, Blizzard game, I guess, forever, or as far as we
Swiss,
know.
wasn't that on your superlatives list?
That was I think that was my greatest disappointment for the year. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so they're kind of taken off of there, and then obviously Vicarious Visions was brought in. Vicarious Visions, other than the recent Tony Hawk, they had actually worked on a bunch of games throughout the years: Guitar Hero, Spider-Man, Crash Bandicoot, Destiny, Skylanders, and a little bit of Call of Duty. I shouldn't say a little bit because I think pretty much every studio jumps on that one at some point or another. So yeah, I was just kind of interested that they were like totally taken off of like what they were doing. So basically, they're just going to be doing the Diablo for now. As far as we know, they're not going to be doing anything on their own. And as far as I can tell, Tony Hawk was received well. It seemed to be doing pretty good. So I didn't really hear any negatives on it. So I was just wondering, I guess, kind of bringing it to you guys if this was more of, hey, we need help on the Diablo side of things more than that Tony Hawk didn't do all that well, or they hadn't been doing well just on their own.
I mean, I think in some ways it's a nod of confidence from Activision about Vicarious Visions, right? They've done a lot of. They were brought in to do the PC port for for Destiny 2. They did the whole Warmind expansion. They've had some really solid Skylanders performances in terms of some of those games. So I mean, their track record's great. I mean, and like you said, they've been around for a good significant amount of time. So I think in some ways it's a corporate pat on the back, but whether it's a creative pat on the back is what I don't know. Like if being brought in to I basically just being a Blizzard studio now and not being Vicarious Visions, if that kills some of that creativity that they might have had with as they've done Skylanders and other things, or if they had other projects that they were hoping to pitch, or maybe this provides them that opportunity of my concern would be that they just become a port house. um uh, but potentially now being under Blizzard, they may be less of a support studio, as you said, like they were doing a lot with Call of Duty and other ports, that maybe this gives them an opportunity to cut their teeth differently. But hard to say. I mean, I think again, it feels the other piece of this is the loss of Team One, which was doing Heroes of the Storm, which was doing. I mean, and that's been winding down for years, but still putting out new content. StarCraft 2 was also part of that same team, so I think it really is a sign of kind of moving on from some of those older franchises, or maybe not
What
knowing what else to do with them.
Yeah, was Heroes of the Storm, didn't they announce that was kinda going away, or was that I think of something
They stopped
else?
active development for it 2 to 3 years ago or so. Like they were no longer doing tournaments, but they've still been
Okay,
putting out. They condensed the team. It was a much smaller team doing it, but they've still been putting out new characters and new maps and things like that. But kind of in a maintenance mode is what I think the term that they used.
okay. Swiss, did you have anything on this one?
That was kind of my same thoughts when I read it, about becoming a port house, or like just a team that does porting, and is that kind of deflating for them? Because if they were going to be permitted to do their own thing, what difference does it make whether they're under the Activision umbrella or the Blizzard umbrella? Because ultimately it's all under the Activision Blizzard umbrella. So the only thing that makes sense is for them moving over is to be, talking about providing support. Like that doesn't, you know, I guess that's good, and that they're trusted, and they can be relied on, and there's a steady maybe pipeline of work, but it doesn't really indicate that they're going to be able to forge um their own path in the near future, at least, because otherwise the move doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it kinda seems kinda in the past too, they were always kinda just, well, maybe except for Guitar Hero, I suppose, but kinda just working on, stuff that was already there, so I don't know. Gascles, got any comments on this one?
Do like me some porterhouse steak. Is that what we were talking about?
Yes, yes, that's what we were. Yes,
Yes,
thank you for
exactly.
joining in. Excellent.
At port house, I was thinking porterhouse, and therefore steak. And away we go.
There we go. I guess you haven't had dinner yet, so alright. Actually, and along with that, the current studio head, Jen O'Neill, is being promoted to Blizzard Executive Vice President of Development, so she'll join, the company's uh, current executive leadership team, reporting directly to the president, J. Allen Breck. And then, former COO of Vicarious Vision will be the new studio head, Simon Ebier. I'm assuming that's how you say that. So he'll head up the studio now. All right. So, Mr. DBQ Hams, Gearbox. Talk to us about Gearbox being
Yeah,
sold,
so
it looks
that
like, huh?
was kinda news of we have multiple I mean, it's been a while since we've had a news show, so we've got a full house, as you said, but this one just came this week. So, Gearbox has been purchased for $363 million, by, Embracer. So Embracer is the conglomerate kind of umbrella company which owns THQ Nordic, Coke Media, and Saber Interactive. And this is in a number of places, GameIndustry.biz. I'm reading off of Eurogamer.net, but it includes not only the 363 million, but it includes performance targets for the next 6 years that potentially bring that deal up to 1.3 billion, depending on how that goes. So, not a whole lot there. We know that Randy Pitchford is still going to be the CEO, at least in the time being. We also know that 2K came out and made a statement that same day to say that they're still publishing Borderlands. So even though that GearBox has now been bought, that 2K is still the proud publisher of Borderlands franchises. So that part is there. I think the other piece of this is I'm going to wrap this all into one big Embracer news story, because they had this is earnings call time, or this is stockholder investment updates. And we also find out that they purchased Aspire Media for 100 million. Aspire Media has been speaking of porterhouses and port houses, Inspire Media is one of the many port houses. They've done some of the Borderland ports for Switch. They just recently did the Jedi Knight ports. So they've done a variety of things, but that purchase, again, from Embracer, but it's going to be held under Saber Interactive. So Saber Interactive is one of the kind of the branches under Embracer, and Saber Interactive has done a number of ports themselves. That they were Crisis Remastered and Ghostbusters Remastered, and lots of other pieces going back. They went all the way back into the mid 2000s, that they were involved with the Halo Combat Involved remaster. That they've had their hand in a lot of different things, but most recently they've been kind of their own developed games have been things like NBA NBA Playgrounds and WWE Battlegrounds, kind of those arcadey sports titles. So, lots of moves from a company name that I was not aware of up until there. We knew about THQ Nordic, but we don't necessarily always hear about the parent company of the other companies. And so, making some moves here. They also purchased Easy Brain, a mobile developer. So they made a number of kind of uh, acquisitions to their portfolio.
Yeah, I had never heard of the parent company before. I was kind of surprised on that one. But yeah, I mean, I've had my problems with the Borderlands series as of late because of a certain CEO. So we'll just leave it at that. I guess Cleese or Swiss, you got any other comments on this one?
I'm just glad that I wasn't the only one that had never heard of Embracer.
The tail on the tape on this is weird. So this is a little similar to, I just had it and I just forgot it. I guess it's a little similar to Google and Alphabet. So the company stood up when it initially bought like all of the leftover scattered IP from THQ, right? And initially stood up. I'm not even certain what their original name was, but at any point, I think we all remember that whoever the name of it was that bought them, took
Right,
on.
I think that's what Coach Media or Coke Media.
Well,
came in.
it says that they acquired Coach Media.
Okay.
So I think they were a going concern before that. But at any rate, there was a point where there were two things named THQ Nordic. There was the parent company, and then there was the actual development studio. And so part of the rebranding was that the parent company took the name Embracer Group, and they left the actual dev studio with the label THQ Nordic. It's actually technically THQ Nordic GmbH is the name of the dev studio. So that's the reason for the confusion. But I guess my thing on this is such a weird deal. So the tweet that came out was that it was just about the overall number, was about the 1.3 billion. So that put it in the ballpark where I was starting to draw some comparisons between it and the deal for Bethesda. Not in terms of, it wasn't nearly a $7 billion deal, but it was above a $1 billion deal.
Well, it's even higher than what Codemasters just went for
Right,
as well, right?
right, exactly.
Yep.
But this is a smaller deal at least at face value, and that seems very strange to me. And the only thing that I can think of, well, yeah, if you pull the Borderlands IP out of that package, yeah, I can see it immediately goes down to 363 million. The thing that also makes it weird for me is it just seems very strange that Randy Pitchford really kind of it decouples those two things. I know what they say. They say, "Hey, we still own the Borderlands IP, and Gearbox is still going to make the games, and we're still going to publish it." But it seems like it creates a bit of a seam between Randy Pitchford, who has at least publicly paraded himself around as kind of the creative mind behind the Borderlands franchise. In the franchise, I mean, we could very easily be looking at another Crisis Far Cry schism, and where you have a separation of like the historical developer and a split into another developer who picks up that franchise and takes over kind of ownership of it, because I don't there's just inevitably going to be inefficiencies by this reorganization and restructuring and movement of Gearbox underneath the Embracer umbrella. And I'm sure that there are things that Embracer has for Gearbox to do. The other thing is that Gearbox was I feel like they were at certain points trying to become. I mean, there's multiple development teams working underneath that umbrella, and so they're kind of a shooter house, so to speak, having deployed multiple games. So it seems like they were more so headed towards trying to become a bit of a publisher themselves.
Because they did in the last year, they had published a couple different.
Right. Yeah, and
they were moving in those directions.
Right, and they grabbed Halo, and I thought they grabbed Duke Nukem 3D as well.
Yeah.
So
They have the Brothers in Arms series and Homeworld, which they just acquired not too long ago also.
Right. And I want to say there's one other like garage IP that they salvaged recently, I want to say too. So at any rate, it just seems like a very strange move, and it wouldn't surprise me if it has something to do with Randy maybe getting ready to move on, or maybe other people who have interest in ownership of the company, who may want Randy to move on, because this seems like the kind of move you would make when there was going to be a big change in leadership, and it's kind of, well, why would we continue to be our own company if Randy Pitchford's going to eventually leave here in the short term.
Yeah, I can see that logic. I can also see that other than Borderlands 3, they really haven't had success in quite a while. And so if they're gearing up for something else, that this becomes a potential cash infusion to do that, if they're looking to, back to your point of kind of the schism between Far Cry, of developer and licensee. Uh, it sounds like 2K is still gonna, from their words, they're still the publisher, which then ends up meaning that it's still gonna be developed by by Gearbox. We're still gonna, on that splash screen, we're gonna end up having a Gearbox and a, whatever Embracer's logo is gonna be, but it's also gonna be a 2K published type of game.
I mean by that's what they say, but yeah, that's the same thing that happened with Crysis, right? Ubisoft was the publisher. They and Crytek got out of sorts. Ubisoft decided to hand over publishing of the Far Cry franchise, right, or development of the Far Cry franchise to a different studio. So it'll be interesting to see how that falls out. I agree with you in the sense of maybe some of those other things that they've worked on have not been like rousing commercial successes, but I feel like they've definitely been creative successes. Having problems talking right. They've definitely been creative successes and have been, maybe if not even fully creative successes, successes in terms of endearment to gamers. So there's a pocket of shooter faithful that like Bulletproof, I think that's the name, or Bullet. What was the name? Bulletstorm.
Bulletstorm.
Yeah.
People humans can fly, or whatever the.
Yeah. People can fly. Yeah, and there's definitely people who have strong heartstring attachments to the Homeworld franchise, and of course, a third game was published in that franchise. A new game was published in that franchise in the last, what, 6 years or whatever. I forget what the name of it was. Deserts of something is what was the prequel to Homeworld. Um, and so there's some stuff there that makes them of value to the gamer community, I think, beyond Borderlands. Um, but yeah, it'll just be interesting to see how that particular chemistry works out.
Yeah, hopefully they get things going more. They had Battleborn. I'm sorry if you had mentioned that one too, that they just closed down actually this month or last month, I believe. Which
No, I
did
didn't mention Battleborn specifically
okay.
for that. I mean, granted, I enjoyed Battleborn, but the fact that Battleborn is Battleborn and died the death that it did, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't.
I actually on kind of different forums I had and Discord servers. A lot of people seem to like it. So I don't know if that was just a victim of when it came out initially, because I think that was right when Overwatch came out, I believe, right? They kind of came out side by
Yeah,
side.
like month
Battleborn might
by
have been
month.
first, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Yep.
But I think Borderlands just had the name, or Overwatch had the name behind it. So we'll see.
I'm pretty sure they
All right.
sent some taunting tweets at Overwatch or whoever it was. Yeah.
I'm sure they wouldn't have done that.
I want to stir the
All right.
pot, but if you're a studio and you're thinking about making out a change in leadership, Jade Raymond just became available.
Sounds like a
True.
transition. So
Yes, so we got some Google Stadia news, and this is for you, DBQ and Swiss. DBQ Stadia first party studios. What's going on with them? Or
So
not?
they announced that they are closing down their first party studios. So uh Stadia Games and Entertainment, Phil Harrison came out and gave a statement, or at least released a statement, right, about that they are ceasing their internal development. So they're closing their internal studios. These are studios that they had spun up for a couple of different studios. Jade Raymond was attached to them as kind of the head of coordinating those. They've released a couple different smaller games, but uh, even last fall they were still talking about adding on staff and building to something, although we never really saw what they were building to. So we don't know necessarily if this is. I mean, we don't know if this is the fact that those studios never really found a vision of what they were trying to create. And so this is Google pulling the plug in that way. We don't know if this is, there's plenty of speculation that this is Google being Google and pulling the plug on a technology that didn't hit the mark that they were hoping to, or lost their interest in, or maybe even never were fully behind in the first place. I've been reading, some speculation about, they definitely pushed hard with Cyberpunk and the prepackaged deal that I took advantage of in terms of, of the winter that, purchase Cyberpunk and you get a Chromecast with it and you get a Stadia Pro package. And if those numbers were not great, that if Cyberpunk and which had hype regardless of how it came out of the hopper, um and that, packaging their unit with it and the controller, if those numbers weren't great to be able to say, what is our first party, if even our first party numbers are going to be less than this, is that a worthwhile investment, right? I mean, so I can see the spreadsheet here of those numbers don't match. Even if we get everybody back, we're still not going to recoup our investment piece here. So, I mean, I can see that piece. One of the other things that I've been reading about since this time is some of the other kind of smaller independent studios that were developing games, that had some seed money from Stadia, that money's been pulled back as well. So, there are, if you look on Stadia Pro, that those games, there's a handful of those kind of smaller games that are free on Pro, but we know that Pro will still continue, Stadia Pro will still continue, that, the focus of their press release here is the shifting from being a game studio and a from being a game creation studio to just being a platform. And whether that is, they use the word partner a whole lot. They're going to be a third party partner, which is actually very similar to what Amazon Luna is doing at this point. They're not creating anything. They're just partnering and licensing to be able to do that. So that is kind of how they're trying to position themselves, and we'll see where that leads. They are committed to keeping it going, so they say. But I think it is very much now is this is the time of investment into, they've made the platform, they've made the streaming piece. um, Reading some of the analysis talks about, kind of moving into that white label model where they're providing the back end and the infrastructure for other game developers and third party studios. Swiss, did I catch everything, or you got other thoughts here? This was you and I both
Um,
flagged this one.
yeah, it's I understand the like Google being Google type thing. Um, you know, th- uh, but I'm honestly I feel like the direction that it's going now feels more Google in a way because um if you're looking at it in terms of a platform, that feels more like how where Google wants to be in like the tech space, right? I mean, when you look at YouTube, I know they have some quote unquote like was Cobra Kai, was that show like a YouTube Red on like they have a handful
It
of
was,
like
yeah.
YouTube only first party things, but like really what are they doing? They're just like we have this tool and we'll help you do what you need to do with it and give us a cut. And so that feels much more like where they'd want to be rather than trying to compete with Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo. Um and kind of on that in that vein, it kind of makes me more impressed like looking back at what Microsoft did when they went from, Microsoft and Windows and and Office and everything and then they're like we're going to do a game system and they put it out there. You look at today's like tech giants like Google, Amazon, that they're not doing anything that makes me feel like they're upending the industry. And they're kind of just like, well, we'll position our infrastructure in a way where we can kind of get a little bit of a cut of this, but it doesn't feel like they're really going after the Microsofts or anything, or in any meaningful sense. Like, I mean, if they were, they would have maybe planned um, a better like better timing on like when they launched Stadia and had some sort of like whatever money they had to throw at like some premier studio for like an exclusive title to like launch their product with a bang. They should have done that. Um, and just this tepid, kind of rolling it out there, and then what is Cyberpunk really going to be your flagship? It's like it's on everything else anyway. Like, uh, so
It works
all of
though, at
those.
least on Stadia.
I'm sorry.
I said it works at least on Stadia.
Well, that's true, but I mean, you take the weird rollout, like the kind of So I think the criticisms of it being Google are legitimate. But if this is how they end up being positioned in the future, I can see it hanging around. We'll see, how long they want to keep it there. If no other platforms really feel the desire to port to it, then I it's not long for this world either.
I mean, do you think like when they first went into this, was this something they really thought that might take off, or was this just like the execs, seeing
I,
okay,
I
you
feel
know what,
like
games are the big thing, so let's get a few big wigs like Phil Harrison and Jade Raymond. Maybe Jade Raymond's a little bit lesser known, but industry knows her. Let's throw these people out there and see what they can do, or were they trying to actually get something going?
feel like these companies are so large and sprawling. There might have been a faction within Google that thought, "Man, we can do this. Let's go get Phil Harrison. Let's go get Jade Raymond. Like, let's like shake up the industry." And if they didn't hit the ground running fast enough, like I'm sure there were a bunch of other VIPs on Mahogany Road that were like, you know what? This isn't developing as fast as we'd like. Let's focus on other things. Like, it's just, um, I mean, I've worked at major conglomerations before, and it was always surprising how much um, internal politics for stuff like this exist in a company. And there'd be people that were very gung ho about some things, and there are others that were very lukewarm. And one faction might win out, and then something that might have seemed uh, impressive or like a future direction suddenly is no more. So um, that'd be my take on it.
Gascles, you got anything else to add?
Yeah, I probably have like 100 miles of stuff, but we
We got
will.
a half hour, so keep
Yeah,
short.
we won't go into it tonight.
Okay. All right, Davey, any last words on that one?
No, I think we can. I mean, I would love to hear Gasicles' thoughts on it at some point in time, but we can come back to that because I'm sure we'll hear some. We'll get other Stadia news at some point, and it'll be a good chance to see if they actually have a chance to be relevant or if this is kind of the sunsetting of things. So let's go ahead and
Yeah,
keep
I
moving.
mean, yeah, hopefully, I mean, they kind of do it. All right, so last one here on the studio front, just real quick. EA launches a new skate studio. The creation of Full Circle, excuse me, is a new studio that they've dedicated to the skate franchise. They're based out of Vancouver, Canada. And this is just kind of a one I want to throw in there just because I've been big into the skateboard, extreme kind of games lately, and I wanted to throw it out there. And the one thing I thought was kind of weird that they're announcing this now is because they've already announced the Skate 4 game back in, let's see, in June of
Yeah, it
last
was
year.
the summer. Yep, with their
Yeah, where I think it was just like like a logo or something. But I mean, I would have figured they would have had a studio in mind. I mean, I guess they probably already had these guys in the studio, but that wasn't announced at the same time, which I thought was kind of weird. But I don't know. Maybe I'm not a game industry person, so I don't know if there's like they just didn't want to, or they just didn't have anything, and they just wanted to get the skate name back out there to to get it back in the public mind. So that was the only kind of weird thing I thought about this article when I first heard about it. So. Uh, any thoughts on that? All right. So let's get talking about money. And I'm surprised, DBQ, you didn't have any. You're usually the money guy, but you didn't have any articles today or this week on this one. Guess, please. Epic Games raking in the dough on the Epic Games Store.
Yeah, and at first I was going to say the reason this is not an earnings call show is because neither DBQ nor I are host, but it may have been because earnings call news kind of came in at the tail end of this cycle. So we're
Yeah.
probably one heartbeat out of sync, and we may have some earnings news analysis next deep dive episode maybe. But one squeaked in time, so this is some of the earnings assessment from the Epic Games Store. They came in with 160 million registered users, $700 million in, I'll call it revenue for the year 2020. 31 million active daily users, which is a 192% jump from the previous year, from 2019, and so that's a big jump. 100.
right, and that's the
Yeah, go
amazing
ahead.
part of that is like 2018, 2019, Fortnite was still kind of on top of the world, and to see that jump continue to this degree, and even in 19, you had mobile releases, right? So that should have spiked it quite a bit, but to continue to grow this way is significant.
Starts to get. I mean, and this will happen as we get further into the year. It starts to get muddied. That impact of the pandemic in here, because some of this I definitely have to attribute to that, but it becomes really difficult to kind of level load. Like to a certain extent, the pandemic created a wedge that is relatively a constant for anyone in this market space, right? Everyone universally kind of experience, or at least the major players experience some jump. What as the year goes on, it gets harder and harder to tell how much of that was attributable to the pandemic purely, and how much of that is just the attractiveness of the service itself. what's impressive in here is, as you mentioned, DBQ, is that these are numbers that show major increases when you could argue that Fortnite is kind of on the wane, at least as far as its preeminence in that space, or its prominence in that space rather. Or the incursion by other strong competitors like Apex and Warzone. And so this is pretty impressive. I think what's really impressive is that, when there was a lot of doubt thrown as to what was going to happen with the Epic Store catalog, and a lot of grousing about how it was kind of felt like it was a relatively anemic offering at its beginning. The catalog sizes more than doubled. And again, there are comments here about how part of that is there's a great big honeypot there at the Epic Game Store with their giveaway of free games, which is still really kind of remarkable when you think about it, and how they approach it, and how many games often go free, and how I think one of the things that's really impressive is how the that gravimetric pull kind of kicks in even when they toss out games that are like not AAA games, right? Like there's a knock-on effect of those smaller games that come out that just kind of keep the wheels greased, and kind of set you on edge as far as like anticipation goes. And then when a big AAA game drops for free, like you know all the boys come running to the yard, so to speak. And we commented in here about how Grand Theft Auto 5 went free at one point and just pulled the servers down. So overall, you can't say this across the board, but I'll just throw it out as kind of a swag, hand wavy kind of statement. Overall in size, they're kind of about half of what Valve is doing, specifically with regard to daily active users. So how that compares to the revenue specifically and some other things, I'm not exactly sure, or kind of not that wrapped around the axle about it. It's fine for me to kind of fix in my head that we're talking about a competitor that's kind of come on to the point where they're half of what Valve's activity is. And again, that's pretty impressive. And I don't know that Epic necessarily needs to do any more than that, right? Their point was to get in there and disrupt, not necessarily to become, the market leader. And I at least appreciate it just in terms of, they've come in as an additional competitor to the market. They've kind of changed the surface of the play area in the market, and they now present another option, for differentiation and diversification. So I don't know, any comments from you guys on those?
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I think I'm glad that there's alternatives. I think in some ways, some of them, and I'm glad that Epic has the money that they have because of the way they're using it at this point, right? They are funding things like, they're helping publish Hitman 3, right? There's money in there that they're giving studios to kind of bolster the Epic Game Store. But from a development point of view, that's beneficial. Like Steam is at the point where it doesn't necessarily need that, and so to have another, going back to the Google disruptor aspect, to have somebody in the market who's trying to to make a place and has the money to be able to do that, um, it makes a big difference to a lot of smaller studios that have been able to publish on Epic, to get their games out there.
I'm just curious to see how the Epic Game Store does when Fortnite does kind of fall by the wayside and they're not getting all the Fortnite cash to, be able to get those free games and purchase all those 1 year exclusivity deals for their store. So um for now I still feel like, I mean, they're still, it's still kind of the entry play for them because they're still, what's the best word for it? Artificially inflating their demand, I would say, at the moment. And I don't think that the store itself um is kind of that attractive factor. It's their investment in those games. And I mean, to a certain, yeah, like you guys have been saying, it's working. People are coming. People are excited about the free giveaways. But I don't. Can that continue forever? Can they always be like the storefront that is giving stuff away. Like, I don't know. Maybe they can be. Epic is, they have the engine. They probably have a good revenue stream, but that to me, I think, is why they've been successful. Relatively successful recently.
I think one of the perspectives is I don't know that they need to give games away free for free forever, right? It could very much turn out to be like an Amazon play, right, where there's a very low cost of entry and initial attraction, bait on the hook, and then once that picks up to a point where it's kind of crosses a perpetuating threshold, then that what's the name that I'm looking for? I can't remember the name. That Rimbaldi device, right? Just maintains its continuous perpetual motion, and you don't have to do that, or at least you don't have to do it as often or as frequently, or with games that are of as large of a value. So I don't know. We will see, I guess.
Yeah, and they can always dial down the free game thing to it. They don't have to throw all the Grand Theft Autos and stuff like that out there all the time. I mean, well, I was gonna say even Twitch does it, but Twitch is backed by Amazon, so they got money too. So I can't really talk on that side. But there's other small services that they'll throw out like the smaller games and indie games and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean,
but I see
to
what
me, this,
But
go
I,
ahead.
but I see what Swiss is saying is that his question is in the event that they do that, right, do the numbers go
Yeah.
down and do the numbers go way down?
Well, they got Rocket League, so that'll take its place. Fortnite. No, I'm just kidding. I think I don't know. The Rocket League might have a resurgence too, just because they're on that same store now. But I mean, for me personally, like, I mean, I'm not a big PC player, so to me it doesn't really matter either way. But uh, I just find it funny how people still kind of argue about the Epic Game Store, just getting the exclusives and stuff like that. It's like, I guess coming from the council side, it's like, okay, I'm used to that, so it doesn't really bother me. And I know we weren't really talking about that side of it, but um, it just I kind of find it funny that it's kind of flipped over now to the PC side, and that happens, and they're usually just timed exclusives, so it's not a super huge big deal. Kind of the same with consoles, more or less. Obviously, you got the big ones like Halo and God of War, but you have those smaller ones that are timed exclusives. So I don't know. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Guess, please. Were you gonna say something else?
Yeah, I mean, I understand it. I guess to a certain extent, like there are for some people it's difficult to understand. It's difficult to understand companies that don't care, right? It's in terms of like they don't necessarily feel right. Like today, I was listening to a lot about Microsoft's pivot and how when they do advertisements now for their services, they will often show somebody consuming their services on a Mac, right, with an iPhone, right, and and the concept that, hey, back in the Steve Ballmer days, you would never see that type of thing, and it's incredibly difficult for like Windows faithful people to understand that Microsoft doesn't care, right? So they get bent out of shape. They're like, why would you show that not on a Windows PC? And I'm like, what Microsoft would have done 10 years ago. So I can understand why it's difficult to come to grips with an understanding of why Epic feels that it's okay to do things that have traditionally been held as not acceptable in the PC regime or not desirable in the PC regime, and to create that bifurcation by making something exclusive. So I understand it. It's the reason is it's because it's a new attack surface, right, in the market. That they've instantiated in the effort to compete with Valve, and that's just the evolution of the industry.
Yeah. And speaking of Microsoft, actually, the next couple stories here we got from you and Swiss. Xbox Series X, Microsoft has been saying, is the most successful launch in its history. Gasicles.
If you want to start this one off, Swiss.
Oh, I was looking at the Xbox Gold. That was kind of the story I had, but I can go with this.
Either or, it's up to you.
So Xbox Series X and Xbox Series S has Microsoft's gaming revenue up, according to this article from Tech Radar, by 51%, which makes it the best ever launch in its history. Which is kind of like so Satya Nadella actually mentioned that most devices ever sold in a launch month, which for me is kind of cool, not cool, interesting, because we had some stories back in November about how hard it was to actually acquire these things. So the fact that they were able to still sell sell like a record number of consoles despite the uh the supply and demand the supply problems uh just shows how much demand is actually out there for these consoles. So, you know, good on Microsoft, I suppose. And also this article even notes uh oh wait, no, that's on the Game Pass. I was going to say Halo Infinite did not launch, you know, in the window with the Xbox Series X and S, and it still was able to drive um a lot of sales. So I thought, for me, like the Nintendo Switch was not initially exciting. I mean, it's exciting for what it was, but I wasn't going to buy it on day one because it was a Nintendo Switch. I think it flew off the shelves because it was a Nintendo Switch and they had The Legend of Zelda out there. So, um, I guess though, Microsoft isn't as tied to some of these series in the same way that Nintendo is, but yeah, I guess I saw this and I was like, that actually surprised me. I didn't really think that was I was going to be reading that news.
Yeah, and they also mentioned, you kind of mentioned it briefly, the Xbox Game Pass subscription has rose up to 18 million. So yeah, I think I'm pretty sure like each console, they kind of say this like each console generation where it's like, hey, this is the best, the most successful launch. Which I mean, if you think about it, I mean, it kind of makes sense just because gaming has been growing so much over the past few years and well decades really. So yeah, but yeah, it is kind of weird where there's such a limited supply this year or last year, I should say, and even into this year, and they're even talking about and probably till June where it's going to be pretty hard pressed to find an Xbox Series S or X. So it's just yeah, just kind of cool. And then Swiss, you also had Xbox's little stumble fall, kind of rolled and kind of came back up maybe
All
on
right.
the next article about gold.
Yeah. So just like when it comes to playing multiplayer games, I'm like PC master race. I don't have to pay extra money to like play with other people. So I'm not an Xbox gamer, but I wouldn't subscribe to Gold. I'm a PlayStation gamer. I do not subscribe to PlayStation Plus because forget that. I'm going to play it on PC instead. And so when I saw this story, it was kind of just bemused me, so to speak. Uh, Xbox, Microsoft announced that Xbox Live Gold subscriptions were going to go up in cost. And there was an immediate backlash to the point where Phil Spencer kind of went on and said his mea culpas, and they rolled it back. So I think not only did they roll it back, but then now they're going to give additional free-to-play games will be available or something. What was it?
Yeah, you won't need
And if
the gold subscription.
yeah, yep,
Yeah, you
if it's
don't
a
need
free to
gold to
play
play
game.
free-to-play games.
Just free to play. Yeah.
So, uh, I, th- you know, I want you wonder about gold for like again, this is my outsider perspective, not an Xbox guy. But how long do they want to keep kind of gold hanging out there instead of having like this unified Xbox Game Pass thing and just, one service that kind of handles everything. And I guess that's what Xbox Game Pass Ultimate is or something, but um,
Yeah.
you know, it'd be nice I think from just like a tidiness to kind of just have one Xbox service for gaming, and that is what it is.
Yeah, it had been rumored for a while now, actually, that they're potentially going to drop gold and just kind of have multiplayer free, like for everything. But that's never come to pass, and they're kind of doing it now with like you said, with the free to play stuff going, not being behind the live gold subscription anymore. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why they even keep gold alive right now. I mean, I guess you got a lot of people out there just that they just want to do gold because they don't even want to do ultimate Game Pass or even just Game Pass. That's another thing. There's like two different variations of the Game Pass also. So where one is just the Xbox version, the other one's Xbox, PC. You got the XCloud in there also. So I don't know why they don't just kind of get rid of at least one of those at the very least. I guess because did you have anything on this one, or I'm sorry, I forgot to ask you on the last article too.
I mean, so on this one, I don't. Has it actually been rumored, or has it just been mongering by Xbox fans? Because I will admit that I've claimed that they will go down to one service because that makes sense, but that was not driven by any inkling of a comment from any Microsoft executive. That's just been, to me, what would make sense. But when I think about the reality of Microsoft, right? This is a company that has Office 365, Microsoft Office on the web, right? It has SKUs all over the place. And they're starting to publish roadmaps about Microsoft Edge and Office 365. And again, it's literally like somebody took a dump of features out of SharePoint or Jira. They're in no order. So I there's 9 different versions of Outlook. There's several different versions of Office, and they're coming out with yet another one that will just be on iPad. So while I have hopes that they would do the thing that would be sensible, I don't actually know that that's what they're going to do. So yeah, I mean, it'll just be interesting to see. I personally think that this whole thing of the price was going to double, and then Phil Spencer waiting in and backtrack. I feel I'm guessing that this was we've talked before in the past how there's at most companies like this, there's a small PR group, but the people who are doing the really heavy lifting are typically outsourced and are a third party. So there's a gap sometimes in communications between corporate, the person who's in whatever division that represents PR, and then the contractor who's actually out doing the work. And then those people having social media accounts and things get spiraling out of control. So it's tough to I can't in my mind think how anybody would ever think that a $120 price tag monthly fee for Xbox Live was anything that there wouldn't have been anything short of a riot about, storming the Bastille. So it's just could have easily been a typo in a memo or something that just got far looser than it was supposed to be. Back on the revenue story, so the total revenue from the gaming division was $5 billion. And hardware sales were up 86%, which is amazingly impressive. For now, again, that's from what were probably relatively anemic sales of the Xbox One in the waning out years of its life cycle, or waning year of its life cycle. So there's that, but I don't know. That's fine. They did stuff. I mean, I guess that's good. I don't necessarily know that this being the biggest launch ever in history. Again, you had the pandemic. Yes, consoles were difficult to come by, but I mean, kind of, sort of, almost to a certain extent. There's definitely a demographic of consumer out there that was like, what else am I going to do with my money? I'm not spending $200-$300 a week commuting right now, putting gas in my car, right? So,
Sure.
while I totally get that there's also, unfortunately, people who have been negatively impacted by the pandemic and are out of work. I mean, there are also remote workers who, might have had an abundance of disposable, cash. And so, those who were able to buy consoles, did so. So, I don't know. It'll be interesting, as Swiss kind of has been commenting. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the coming year or so, as we all hope and pray, the restrictions of the pandemic release, and as more people get vaccinated, it'll be interesting to see just how the whole dynamic plays out. The play of the Xbox Series S being on the market, again being head to head with the Nintendo Switch, and kind of creating that potential once people are able to go into stores. If you do have those two things sitting on the shelf, that shoulder shrug of like, I may as well buy a $2.99 console. So I don't know. That'll be interesting.
DB, any thoughts on this one or these last two?
No, I think we can move on. I think everybody's kind of captured a lot of the good conversation here. So
All right. All right. So speaking of spending money, Swiss, GameStop. Their stock was blowing up the last week. Well, actually, a couple weeks really. You had this article here from the Motley Fool, I believe, or from the Fool.com.
Yeah, we don't usually pull articles from there for E2KG. So I kind of think I found out about this along with most of the rest of the planet. But I guess there was a hedge fund, Melvin Capital, that was basically going heavily short on GameStop. So they were betting against the stock. They were thinking it would go down and then they'd be able to profit from it going down. And the folks on Reddit kind of banded together and started buying up the stock because they knew if the company shorts it, at some point they're going to have to buy back those shares at what they thought was hopefully a lower price, but Reddit was wanting to make it a higher price. So yeah, I don't really, this isn't really the forum for discussing, I think financial news, nor am I the person to be doing it, even if it was. So I was just, when I threw this in the story list, I was just bemused that there was this whole furor over GameStop. And it was neat because also, well, funny because it was also mixed in with this whole irreverent Reddit meme culture. And, you have like major, business TV shows like having to talk about like Reddit memes and whatnot. So um, it's just this interesting fusion of internet and gamer culture with like the wider world that doesn't normally happen. And I think it spiked up to well over $300 and it's back down, I think, to like the $50 range is the last I checked today. But um, yeah, it's just one of those weird stories, I think, and it's fairly tangential. We could maybe discuss whether the hedge funds were right to really try to, um, you know, expect GameStop to be on its deathbed, or whether or not they could linger around the industry for a little while longer. But you know, uh, for me, it was just giving a hat tip to this story and saying, yeah, that was weird, wasn't it?
I think I hit what, like 400 or 500, maybe even higher than that. That's not at the highest.
I thought the max got to like maybe around close to 400, but I might be mistaken.
Yeah, I think it was somewhere around there. Yeah, it's just crazy. Yeah. It's in the news when my boss is talking about it. So like,
Yeah.
and he's not like a huge gamer or anything. I mean, he plays some, but nothing major. I was just like, whoa. I'm surprised he brought it up. But yeah, it's just interesting. I guess, please, DB, you got any thoughts on this one?
A few different things. So I think this is absolutely the forum to discuss financial news with regards to the gaming industry. But
I guess I didn't mean it in terms of you. Let me rephrase that. I didn't mean we don't talk about financials. I meant like, um, I am not trying to be CNBC. We're not trying to be CNBC here. We're not Bloomberg. That's
right,
what I meant.
right, yeah, no, I know. I'm totally just joshing you. Yeah, I think what's interesting, and I almost hate to say this, I think what's so very interesting about this is, as we've seen before, is before I say this, let me always say, always use your superpowers for good. Always be a force for good. But this is interesting in terms of things that we have seen before where quite honestly, when gamers stop squabbling and actually unify, that there is actually an influential ability to derive a certain response from either from industry forces, whether they be industry members themselves or, in this case, what I think of as external forces playing in the gaming industry. You know, didn't necessarily care for the outcome, but swung the influence in terms of what BioWare decided to do about the ending of Mass Effect 3. Also has, I think there's been some impact on Apex, but there's been a few instances where when the Xbox gold price adjustment influence. So I think there are instances where people can do things. It's very interesting that some very smart people who are also gamers who I at the end of the day they did this I think out of a genuine care for the gaming industry and the players in the market, in a situation that to a certain extent from a certain optic you could view as kind of external forces being kind of abusive or kind of playing games with a player in the market. And like look, I know GameStop gets a lot of hate, but at the end of the day there are employees who work there are human beings who work there are people whose fates are tied to the success or failure of that business. And that is impacted by the stock price and the daily trading that goes on. And so somebody intervening with a force that's short selling the stock, may have been seen as a thing that they were doing in good conscience, I guess. Kind of like the way that I often say, hackers and people like Anonymous, like, hey, instead of taking down the PlayStation Network and like impacting kids getting great Christmas gifts on Christmas Day, why don't you point that power at something else that should really is really trying to abuse people instead of trying to bring entertainment and joy to people's lives. So I don't know. It's just it's an interesting event. It feels a lot like those events and things like EVE Online or Warcraft, where like weirdly like large bands of gamers like band together to inject a dynamic event into a universe that seemingly they wouldn't have control over. But on those occasions, prove otherwise.
So I love the thesis there, Gascles, of gamers banding together. I I don't know that that's not how I see this though. I mean, I see this originating out of kind of hobbyist trading and those subreddits threads. And I think that the fact that it happened to be GameStop, it gives games media something to latch onto, but it could have been anything. Really, I mean, the key piece here was the short sale and the the notice of those on Reddit about that they were over in the short sale. That they had more short sale than they had stock available, and so it was it's the equivalent of it's not the equivalent of a run on the bank. It is you've loaned me something and I think I'm going to be able to resell it, but now you're going to come back. So I've resold it, but now you want it and I don't have it to give it back to you. So that piece, the interesting piece from the economics person in me is really interested in this in terms of the ability of the market to coordinate in a way that the traditional institutions had not provided for or accounted for, really. Right, that's what we saw when you see the news on CNBC and you see regulators talk about the unfairness of using technology to coordinate, rather than simply you know sitting around in an office doing this within a firm, which is still coordinating. So yeah, I think that that's the piece to me is the ability of technology to do this. The gaming piece of it, I don't know that in the long run or even in the short run it helps GameStop other than kind of publicity around it, right? I mean, that it potentially helps GameStop investors if they've gotten in and gotten out at the right times, but if they're still in the long play of this, it's gonna settle back down into potentially where it was originally.
I think I kind of I understand Agascles' point. I kind of lean more towards DB just because DB's point on the like who, like if it was really gamers or if it was just like this Reddit internet culture, like Wall Street sub Reddit, because they also did like AMC theaters and BlackBerry, and you could make an argument that AMC theaters is also going towards that demographic of, you know, like nerd culture. Like, I mean, it's something there's something to be said for being able to go see like a Marvel movie or a Star Wars movie opening up on opening weekend with all your friends that we haven't experienced for a while with the pandemic and everything. So I can see like there's that nostalgia play for AMC, but BlackBerry was also one of these like overshorted, I think, stocks that they kind of were also working with, and I struggle to see like a reminiscent, like them reminiscing for the days of BlackBerry. So that's
Yeah,
kind of
and I mean, I'll pull the gamer altruism off the table, certainly. But I mean, just like like Swiss said, to me, it's still a one stick positive, right, in the direction of a democratization of power that has historically been held by fat cats on Wall Street sitting in 32nd floor offices, right, who charge people exorbitant rates for their ability to participate in that trading as a third party, right? It's lower level people who are not who by the power of technology no longer have the obstacle of you have to spend money to make money, kind of, at least not at the magnitude that they previously had to. And they I mean, like you said, Swiss, they have to be somewhat technology savvy in order to recognize that these are even these aren't toasters and microwaves, right? They have to be aware of at least dynamics in the digital market to a certain extent to even pay attention to those things. So
well, one other point, building off what DB had mentioned with how we see this affecting GameStop moving forward. I think it's in addition to publicity, um, you know, I just I think it's a net positive because it's just I think it I think the fear in some ways the fear that like GameStop could go away. I think there's just like a nostalgia play for it now. Um, in some ways, it's kind of like GameStop became almost like the mom and pop shop in your town that you're like, yeah, I could probably get this cheaper on Amazon, but I should probably patronize this store and go to it. And in a way, there's almost like a sympathy play now for GameStop. And yeah, I think that probably moving forward is probably good for them. But
it just cemented my wish that I wish somebody would just buy GameStop. Like I mean, as far as I'm concerned, buy them and take them private. Like just move them out of this zone of misery, and just put them in a place where they're a little. Because I mean, for all that we say about how poor and bad GameStop mismanagement is, I understand where it's driven from. It's driven from from their desire to be profitable, or at least and maybe they're being pushed to achieve outlandish goals of profitability, but their attempt to be profitable in a ridiculously highly competitive market that's being driven more and more towards commodity where margins are razor thin. So it'd be nice, if, like you mentioned, Swiss, if somebody out of the goodness of their heart would just buy them.
All right. So for the sake of time, I'm gonna kind of jump past these last two news stories, which are kind of game stories on baseball and Halo. I'm pretty sure we'll hear, excuse me, more about these in the coming months here. So, gentlemen, picks plays for next week. Lots of sites and shows are exorcising the last round of Game of the Year energy for 2020. We're going to spend some time with your Game of the Year game. Is it the same as it was during your Superlative show? don't know. Some of these I don't remember even talking about. Or has there been a shift of energy and focus as the new year has been started? So let's talk about these Game of the Years more in detail and in depth, and how they inform our tastes and most anticipated games for the coming year 2021. Guestclies, you're going to be playing Anthem on the PC. DB, you're going to play Treachery in Beatdown City, which I don't remember that one. I don't know if that was a change from the Superlative Show or not.
Oh yeah,
I'm
that's an
go-
addition. Yep.
okay, that's what I thought. I'm going to be playing Immortals: Phoenix Rising on the Switch, and the DB, that's you're going to be playing that on the Switch also. And then Swiss, you're going to be playing Ghosts of Tsushima on PS4. Gentlemen, thank you for once again a great show. We had a lot to talk about, and I think more. I think some of us held back a little. We skipped a few stories, excuse me. But I think it was a good one for tonight. Next week is our GX show, so we'll be talking about the games we've been playing, along with our Pix plays. That'll be hosted by Agascles Thamos, and with co-hosts of myself and Swiss Guard. DB, Q Hams, Swiss Guard, Agascles, thank you once again for joining me tonight. Please take care of each other out there. Be safe, and we'll see you next time.